Hare Krishna. My name is Amogha Lila. I'm from San Diego, California, and I'll speak a little bit about how I came to Krishna Consciousness. My interest in spiritual life, you could say, indirectly began when I was very young. I remember at a very young age, even when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, I had the feeling that that I didn't belong in the world. I had a feeling of isolation. I felt isolated from the rest of the world. I felt like I had been born, but I didn't know why I was born. And my mother was my parents were telling me that I should go to school and I should do this and I should do that. But I really felt like I hadn't had some very basic questions answered, even at a very young age. And so I had this very deep feeling of isolation, even as a child. And so I grew up in you could say a middle-class, normal area in the United States, where most people were not so interested in philosophy. They weren't so interested in answering such questions. So I remember I would have discussions sometimes with my father growing up. Of course, this was a little bit later, regarding the nature of existence and why we existed, or why anything existed at all, why there wasn't just a universe full of empty space or something like that. I remember discussing like that with my father. And my father was a generally thoughtful person, so he would indulge those questions, but no real answers from anyone. Both of my parents grew up in the Soviet Union. They were both very strong atheists. My father especially was very strongly atheistic. My mother had some kind of sentiment toward Christianity because she grew up in a village. So whatever, those people are a little bit more traditional, you could say. My father grew up in the city, so very strong atheistic ethos, which was passed down to me. So growing up, I never went to church. I was never interested in spirituality or anything like that. But I did have this very deep feeling of isolation and a lot of questions about why I existed or why anything existed at all. So fast forward to, I guess, around my teenage years, I got interested in reading philosophy to some extent. And I was reading some books by existentialist authors. And I got interested also in a philosophy called solipsism, which is basically the idea that nothing exists outside of our own mind, and our reality is just an illusion, and it doesn't exist outside of the mind. I guess you could say it's something close to Mayavad. But anyway, I was interested because that was the only thing that really, that I'd heard that sort of lined up with my experience. I felt very isolated from the rest of the world, and I felt almost like the whole world was fake, and I couldn't really find my place within it. So that philosophy kind of appealed to me. That actually it is fake. It's all, nothing is real, and the reason that I felt isolated was because the whole thing was an illusion. So I started reading like that, and I read some other things. Still never interested in religion or Christianity or anything like that. I never went to church or anything. But I did get a copy of Bhagavad Gita, not Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, but just a translation by some, I think he was Indian person. I think his name was Ekanath something. I'm forgetting his last name. But it was Bhagavad Gita rendered into English poetry. So, the language was a bit difficult to understand. And of course, even those who read Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, if you don't read the purports, if you just read the text, it's not very easy to understand. So you can imagine it's all the more difficult if it's in poetry and also you don't have any explanations. So, but I read it, and at the very least I was attracted to the sort of, it struck me as something very deep. It was mysterious, and it was kind of mystical, but I could tell that there was something there. Up to that point, I hadn't really been exposed to any kind of non-completely materialistic philosophy. Nothing like mystical or spiritual or anything like that. So when I read that, I thought it was kind of interesting. It was something new, something I hadn't heard before. So I kind of noted that. I became a little bit interested. That same author, he translated some of the principal Upanishads. He had just a one-volume book about that thick. And I got that also. I read that. And then I kind of, after reading those things, I became kind of interested in, I guess, for lack of a better word, you could say Hinduism. I wasn't really interested in the religious life of a Hindu or, the rituals or this or that. But I liked the kind of mystique of the, philosophy, or at least what my understanding of the philosophy was at that time. So I sort of kind of started identifying with that a little bit. Because I had some friends who had spoken about this too, and they, for my birthday one year, or at least one of them for my birthday one year gave me a book called Bhakti Yoga, The Art of Eternal Love, which is, for those who know, or I guess for those who don't know, a book published by the BBT. I'm not sure if it was published during Srila Prabhupada's time or after, if it was compiled after. But anyway, Bhakti Yoga, The Art of Eternal Love. I got that book on, I think it was my 15th or 16th birthday when I was in high school. And I saw it and I looked at the cover, and I had a very, because I was skeptical about religion, I saw it and I saw the cover, and I just thought it was kind of like I wasn't really interested in reading anybody's own personal ideas, which is, I guess, is kind of ironic, because I was, when I was reading Western philosophy, I was kind of reading, people's own ideas. But somehow or other, when I saw it, I said, oh, this is just somebody's interpretation. And what I was interested in reading was the actual ancient texts. But of course, little did I know that was actually a good and authorized presentation. But when I saw it, I just thought it was something, some other. I never bought into the whole New Age spirituality or the hippie yoga sort of thing. So I was kind of sensitive to it because I saw that it was really sentimental, and I was never really interested in it. So anyway, I saw the book, and that was sort of my opinion of it. But I did flip through it, and I saw the pictures, and I really liked the pictures. I thought the pictures were really nice. And in particular, there was that painting of Rupa and Sanatana Goswami they're sitting under a tree and they're both writing. And so I cut out that picture, and I think a picture of the rasa dance also, and maybe one more. There was that picture of the changing bodies. Not the one that anyway, there's two pictures. There's one where on one side there's like a Grim Reaper, and on the other side there's a woman, and there's an infinity, and then there's all these animals. So I cut out that one, and I pasted those on my wall. And that was sort of the extent of my interaction with that. Over the years, when I was in high school, in my teenage years, I got some other books. But same thing, I never bothered reading them, and I thought it was just kind of some bogus thing. But one thing that did come out of that is I looked into Iskcon and I looked into Srila Prabhupada, because whatever, on the front of the book it says, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So I did look up Iskcon and Prabhupada, and I saw that there was a temple. I saw that there was a temple near me in my town. I saw that there were monks. Somehow or other, I came across a website. If I remember correctly, I think it was for the Iskcon Sannyas Ministry, interestingly enough. And I saw a picture of what I remember was, of course I didn't know it at the time, but I thought I saw it later, and I realized that it was Indraduna Swami's sannyas ceremony. But anyway, I saw that picture, and I said, okay, there's monks, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I remember my father growing up, one time we were watching TV and some documentary about Buddhist monks came on or something like that, and my father told me that just look at these people, what are they doing? They're just wasting their life. They're just sitting in some temple or some whatever monastery, just sitting there doing nothing with their life. And I never really bought into it. Anyway, I didn't fully agree with him, but anyway, I saw that picture, and I saw that there was monks, and I saw there was the whole thing. But again, still, I was very skeptical of organized religion, especially organized religion based around, one person, or even just accepting the spiritual authority of people. I didn't really accept that humans could be proper mediums of spiritual knowledge. So anyway, just kind of kept it in the back of my mind. Fast forward a couple years, I was 18 years old, and I was just about to go to college. And I really didn't like the idea of going to college. Growing up, I had this idea that I wanted to escape from the modern world. I didn't want to live the way that people were living. I saw the way that people were living, and the track that most people get on. They go to school, and then they get a job, and then they get married, and then they have children, and I just saw that although everybody was following this, everybody was on this track, nobody questioned why. Nobody questioned why they were on this track. Nobody questioned whether or not this was actually the best way to live your life. And especially, of course, everybody has to do some work in the world, and it's good that people get married and things like that. But at least the way that it was the modern world has developed, and the way that those things are done nowadays, with college, how competitive college is, and the job market, how cutthroat the whole thing is, and everybody's in anxiety about, I need to get a degree, I need to pass this exam, I need to get this job, and then when they have the job, then they're worried about getting fired or promotions, or it's just a really ruthless, merciless system. And so I really didn't want to be a part of that. From a very young age, I really didn't want to be a part of that. So I was interested in finding a way out, and but nobody ever really presented me with any good alternative. One thing I remember when I was I was probably 13 or 14, and I was having lunch with my mother, and at that time I was listening to, I was interested in, I liked American folk music, and one common theme in American folk music is the idea of like a hobo, which now that word just means somebody who's homeless and somebody who's just a bum or something. But what it previously referred to was somebody who would travel from place to place, and especially they would travel in freight cars, in empty box cars, on freight trains, and they would sneak on and they would travel like that from town to town, working or doing whatever. So there are people who still do that. And I remember, I think I saw one documentary or something like that, or some video, and I remember speaking to my mother about it. And I told my mom, I said, yeah, I saw these, there's these people, and they just travel around, in freight trains, and they're completely free, and they don't have to worry about anything. And I told my mom, I said, that sounds really cool. And of course, mind you, I was 13 years old. I wasn't thinking about how my mother would take that. My mother was both my mother and my father were very adamant that I should get into a good school, and they wanted me to have a good, materially successful life. So of course, my mother, upon hearing that, became she scolded me. She said, "What do you want to be you want to be homeless? You want to be a bum? You just want to live like a vagabond? How could you say that?" And so I just kind of shut my mouth, and I didn't say anything about it. And then anyway, later there were other things. There was one person also I was inspired by. His name is Dick Prenneke. He was a factory worker in the 1950s, and there's a whole story, but he got some injury in the factory, and then he decided that the whole materialistic civilization that had developed, industrial civilization, was just some big death trap. And he flew out to the wilderness in Alaska and built a cabin and basically lived in that cabin for the rest of his life, away from modern society. And I was also very attracted to that. I remember I spoke to my father about that, and I had the same kind of reaction, So anyway, I was interested in escaping modern life. I really didn't want to participate in the sort of modern materialistic. Of course, I was also a materialist. It's not that I was a big spiritualist or something, but at least I knew that the form of materialism, currently, fashionable in modern society, was just really bad. And so, I was 18. I was just about to start college, and I was at that point, I was just really fed up. I was really, really fed up, and I didn't want to go to college, not because I was lazy, not because I didn't like to study, but because nobody ever really gave me a solid answer as to why I should do it. Of course, they would say that, okay, you have to support your family somehow, and this and that. So on that level, you could say I was interested in getting a job, just to maintain myself. But just the whole thing, why should I live like this? Why? Anyway, I just had a lot of questions about why the world was the way it was. And I never got any good answers, so I wasn't enthusiastic, to participate in that whole system. So at that time, I was getting a bit more serious about figuring out what the meaning of life was, what I was supposed to be doing. I wanted to live in an ethical way. I wanted to do the best thing possible. So at that time, a couple years prior, I'd become vegan. I'd stopped eating meat and stopped eating milk and eggs and everything. Basically, any animal products I stopped eating because I felt that it was unethical. So I wanted to do something good with my life. I wanted to do something positive and meaningful. But I hadn't really found what that meant. So I was searching. And I remember one day I went to the beach with my girlfriend at the time. And on the way back from the beach, I was sleeping in the car. And I had put the seat down and I was kind of, lying down. And I opened my eyes just momentarily. Maybe a bump woke me up or something like that. But anyway, I opened my eyes. And right as I opened my eyes, we were passing by this building and I saw a sign that said Hare Krishna Temple. And I remember I said to my girlfriend, I just blurted out, I said, "Oh, that's where that is." And she said, "What?" And I said, "There's this Hare Krishna temple." And she was sort of interested in yoga and meditation. And so she was, not particularly spiritual, but at least she had some interest in yoga and maybe also meditation. So anyway, I said that Hare Krishna temple, and she's like, "Oh," she didn't really know what I meant or what I was talking about. But I told her, I said, maybe we should go. Which is interesting because by that time, my opinion hadn't really changed about what Iskcon was or, who the devotees were. I had no reason to believe that it was anything good. Anyway, nothing had really changed my mind. But nevertheless, I was kind of desperate. I wanted to get some kind of spiritual association. I felt like everybody that I was with at that time, that I was associating with, was just completely materialistic and they weren't really thinking about life. And so I said, okay, anyway, may as well just try. We can just go see how it is. So we tried going they have a program on Thursday. We tried going for that, but then we arrived late. And so I was embarrassed that we had gotten there late. So I just said, okay, anyway, we'll go on Sunday because they had a Sunday program also. So then we came there on Sunday, we got there early, and I went inside and I spoke to, we went inside, I took off my shoes and everything, and then one devotee walked down from there's some upstairs area. And I remember seeing him, he had shaved head and he had a, shika, and he was wearing saffron, dhoti, and kurta. And I remember seeing him and thinking, I've seen this before somewhere. I had no exposure to, Hinduism or Hindu culture or anything like that. But I remember thinking this thing on the back of the head, and I remember I saw his Brahmin thread through his kurta, the impression of his Brahmin thread, on his back. And I thought, I've seen that before also, this thing across the chest. And somehow it all seemed really familiar to me. I couldn't really put my finger on it, on where I had seen these things before. But anyway, I spoke to him. He asked me, where are you from and what are you doing with your life and just basic sort of questions. And I spoke with him for a little bit, and then he invited me inside the temple and we went inside. And I remember the first thing that struck me was the smell. The smell of the temple it was a very pleasant smell. There was incense burning, of course. And also the temple there, it's very, the devotees there in the 70s, they designed the interior of the temple based on one devotee went to Vrindavan and Jaipur and she got a bunch of, design inspiration from there. And they have these really beautiful sculptures, on the walls, like reliefs on the walls in the temple. So I thought that was also very nice. There was a lot of, there's a lot of art, and the smell was very nice. And so immediately I thought, okay, this is something kind of new to me. Because I hadn't been in I had been inside of churches, previously, especially old churches, just mostly as a tourist, because we would go to Europe as a kid, or when I was a kid. And, but anyway, I did feel like this was something, different, something interesting. And then eventually, somebody came out and blew a conch, which it's also something new. And then the curtains opened, and there were these statues, as I thought they were, of there was two with their hands up, and there was two. One was holding a flute, which I recognized that was Krishna because I had seen that book, that Bhakti Yoga book, and it's Krishna there on the front. And there's Radharani, and then there's these three all the way on the right. Then there was these three small ones. They had these arms like this and these big eyes. It was Jagannath. So anyway, it was an intense sensory experience. But I thought it was pleasant. And then there was kirtan going on, and I liked kirtan actually because I had looked into just in my research with Hinduism and things like that, I had found out about kirtan. I was listening to some kirtan, not Hare Krishna kirtan, but just some bhajans and mantras and things like that. And so I liked kirtan. That's one of the reasons actually I wanted to go to the temple, because there was kirtan. So anyway, I liked the kirtan. Danced. I think I remember dancing in the kirtan, and then there was the class. And that same devotee who spoke to me when I first came, he gave the class. He spoke about the letter that Srila Prabhupada had sent to one devotee. I don't remember being particularly enthralled by the class. I mean, I don't remember being particularly impressed or anything like that and thinking like, wow, this is really like amazing. This is exactly what I was looking for. They were talking about God. I wasn't really interested in God. But I did really like just the whole atmosphere. I liked the devotees. And I wanted to, look into it more. I wanted to be involved more, even though I wasn't really interested in the philosophy, at least at that time. So then anyway, after the class, there was another kirtan, and then this devotee, we sat down and took prasadam. Now, again, like I said previously, at that time I was vegan. I wasn't eating any dairy products. And I had just kind of assumed that they were also vegan, because I heard that they didn't eat meat, and I just assumed that meant that they didn't drink milk or anything else either. So I remember we were sitting, and I was a really militant vegan. I was really strong about veganism. And so anyway, we were sitting taking prasadam, and I was speaking to this devotee, and I remember I started eating there was halava. And I started eating the halava, and I said, wow, this is really good. What is this? And he said it's called halava. It's a sweet. It's made with, semolina flour. And I said, it's really good. I've never had anything like this before. And he said, yeah, you know why it's good? I said, why? He said, because it's cooked in butter. And I was like, oh man, I can't believe it. I just ate butter. I hadn't eaten dairy for some years at that point. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to be disrespectful. But I remember when he said that, I looked over at my girlfriend who was also eating, and she was also eating the halava, and she was about halfway through. And when she heard that, she just dropped her spoon. She was eating whatever. And so somehow or other, that didn't really disturb me that much. I was disturbed, but I didn't say anything. And it didn't, normally something like that would really, I'd be really repulsed by that. I would have been like, oh my God, how could you do that? Whatever. But somehow or other, I was, I still kept talking to this devotee. And I told him at that time, actually, that because I had seen that website for the Iskcon Sannyas ministry and that picture, and so when I saw him with shaved head and tilak and orange clothes, I thought he was a sannyasi. And so I told him, because again I was interested, I wanted to leave, I wanted to escape somehow modern society. And so I told him, I said, I'm thinking about, my exact words were, I'm thinking about becoming a sannyas. And he kind of laughed about that. He laughed, and then he said, you can do it, no problem. And, he was nice about it. He was encouraging me. This devotee's name is Balaram Prabhu. He's the temple president there in San Diego. And anyway, he was kind. He spoke to me, and he invited me. There was a program on Wednesdays, which was about 2 or 3 days after this. I guess 3 days after the Sunday program. And it was at this farm there in San Diego. So he invited me there. I went there, and actually what happened is I read, because they added me to this temple newsletter. That farm program, it was mostly kind of like a devotee get together. So on the newsletter, it said it was a potluck. That so devotees should bring their own, preparation, and they were going to offer it. So I thought that I had to cook something, and so I did. And what I did is I made dal. I cooked dal, but of course I had no idea how to cook dal. So what it was probably about half cooked. And it wasn't soup. It was just completely dry. It was like dry, half-cooked dal. I looked up I never cooked really before. I had made I could make sandwiches and I could put things in the microwave and things like that, but I had never really cooked. And what's worse is that I put garlic in it also. And I had seen online, I remember I read online that there was one website, it said that generally you'll never find garlic or onion or mushroom in a Hare Krishna kitchen. So when I read generally, I thought, okay, most of the time they don't have it, but it's not like they can't take it or something like that. Because in my mind, what's wrong with garlic? How could you not? How could you be so fanatical that you don't eat garlic? So anyway, I put garlic in it, and I think onion also, just like powders, so you couldn't really. It's not like you could see it or something. So anyway, I brought it there, and yeah, of course, looking back on it, it's pretty painful. The memory of them putting it on the plate and offering it to the deity, and then distributing it to the devotees. And but anyhow, I didn't know any better. Then when I was there at that program, there was one other devotee named Mukunda Charana Prabhu. He's a brahmachari who's staying there at the farm, and Balaram Prabhu had spoken to him a bit about me. And one thing that came up, we were talking, and he said, yeah, Bhakta Alex, he wants to take sannyas. And I was a little embarrassed because, I had just gotten there and I felt like, oh, probably they think I'm like, sentimental or something like that. And so I changed my story, actually. I told them that, no. I didn't say I was thinking about taking sannyas. I said that I was just been thinking about sannyas, just like contemplating it and like meditating upon what it means to be and how I can apply, the principles in my life. I changed my story. And he said, I think he kind of caught on to that. And he said, it's okay, don't worry. He said, Lord Chaitanya took sannyas when he was 24. And I didn't know who Lord Chaitanya was. And I was too embarrassed to ask, so I said, oh, okay, interesting. So anyway, then I started regularly visiting the temple, and my friends sort of heard about, whatever. I mean, I told my friends about it. I told my parents about it, and they started to become a little bit skeptical. They saw that I was becoming less and less interested in school. I mean, I was already uninterested in school is the thing. But I was really becoming just completely uninterested in school. My grades started dropping. At this point, I was only in college for about 4 months. Or maybe even less than that. And whatever, they saw that my grades started dropping and they said, you're going to this temple and they're teaching you this and that. They're teaching you that you should just forget about school and this and that, and that's why your grades are dropping. And so they were a little bit upset about that. And my friends gradually, in the beginning they were nice about it, but gradually as time went on, they started also feeling a little weird about it, and they were saying some things, they were making some comments, and gradually they kind of stopped talking to me, stopped hanging out with me. And then I found out that they were making fun of me behind my back. And so things slowly kind of started. I started seeing that, things were slowly kind of like falling apart for me. Fast forward a little while. I mean, this is within, a few weeks or months. And at that point, I was really, just really fed up. And I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't be in school. I couldn't, I just couldn't convince myself that was what I was supposed to do with my life, was just go to school and then get some job and then just spend, the vast majority of my life just slaving away for no reason. If I had some reason to, to work, like that, then fine. But I wasn't given any good reason aside from the fact that I have to just maintain myself. And I was saying, okay, but I can maintain myself in so many ways, it's not the only way. So there was some tension, with my family and my parents. Again, they were getting upset with me going to this temple, and eventually they told me, they said, you know what, you need to leave the house, you need to get your own apartment, and you need to see what it's like, to live in the world. And then you'll snap out of all these, romantic ideas, and you'll, come to your senses a little bit and become whatever, more, I don't know, I guess fixed up or, in your material life. And so at that time, one thing that I forgot to mention, at that time I think I spent 2 or 3 weekends staying in the temple because the devotees had invited me. I never thought in a million years that I would ever, join or become a monk or something like that. To me, that was something just so far off. I never really, considered that a real possibility. I might have had some romantic kind of idea about it, but I never really thought that I actually would have the guts to do it. But anyway, so fast forward some time, my parents told me that I should get out of the house. And I remember thinking, well, I could go and get some apartment. My parents were offering to pay for it, so my father said, you look online, find some apartment, and you go live outside. And so, and I said, okay, I was thinking I could do that. But at that point, if I'm not living under my parents' roof and I don't have to, please them or appease them, then maybe I should just go live in the temple. And so I told my father that same day, I told him, I said, you know what, I think actually I'm just going to go live in the temple. And at first he kind of thought about it, and he was kind of like, okay, interesting. He was a little bit skeptical. He said, I feel like you're joining a cult. And I said, no, it's okay. And he said, okay, whatever. And then he spoke with my mother. And then gradually, I think, over the next several days, they kind of thought about it and spoke about it. And then things started to get really ugly. They became really, really upset. And I think they had also done some research online and seen all the bad stuff that people say about Iskcon online. And so they became really, really upset. And then at that point, it was like every day, my mother's crying, my father's, yelling, my mother's, screaming, and it's just fighting all day, on and on and on. And even at some points it got physical. I mean, not that I was, hurting my parents, but at least my father, he was so upset, he pushed me on the ground one time, and it was really ugly. At that time also, I had a girlfriend at the time, and I told her that I wanted to do this. And she also became really envious, or at least, just really upset. And she said that I had given her one picture of Radha Madhav, and she said she wanted to burn it. She said she hated Krishna. She said she hated the devotees, and that basically she hated me for wanting to join, and that I was selfish. And I think there maybe was something to that. I think, whatever, I was 18 years old, I was naive, I was trying to figure out my life. And so I think I was probably not as sensitive as I could have been with the people around me. But anyway, then all my friends heard about it. Even though I wasn't really speaking to them, she spoke to them. And they all started becoming really really mean and making fun. And at that point, my whole life, all of my relationships just completely fell apart. I didn't have my parents anymore. I didn't have my girlfriend. I didn't have any of my friends. Just everything completely fell apart. And I got sick, actually. I got whooping cough, which I don't know if maybe you don't call it that in India, but anyway, I got this thing called whooping cough, which usually only small children get it, but I got it. And I was out of school for a week. Actually, I probably could have been out of school for less time, but of course I wasn't exactly eager to go back to school. So I was gone from school for about a week. And after that, I said, it's going to take a lot of work to catch up on all my schoolwork. Maybe I should just forget about it, And so I had dropped out of school. So everything had fallen apart. My school, my relationships, everything was gone in a very, very short amount of time. It was pretty shocking because it wasn't, anyway, it all fell apart in a pretty dramatic way. Then just right before I joined the temple, right before I was going to move into the temple, I got a text from my girlfriend one night in the middle of the night, and she said that I just, went into my medicine cabinet and I got all the pills that I, could find, and I just took them all, and I'm gonna die, I'm gonna kill myself. And, again, at that time there was a lot going on. It's not like I didn't care about her, didn't care about any of these people, so it was affecting me. And that was just like, oh my God, like what are you even supposed to say? Of course I told her, you go tell your parents, what are you texting me for? Like, why did you do that? And then anyway, she went to a mental hospital. She was in a mental hospital for some time. And so anyway, everything just fell apart in a really fantastic way, in a really big, dramatic way. So then when I joined the temple, I left one morning without saying anything. My brother took me. My brother was the last relationship that I had. My brother's a pretty simple guy. He's whatever. He's not a very dramatic or emotional person at all. He's pretty stoic kind of person, actually. So he didn't really care enough, to get mad at me for all this. So anyway, he drove me to the temple one morning, early morning, and I didn't say goodbye to my parents or anything like that. I just left, and then he dropped me off. And I remember this was the cherry on top of the whole thing. He dropped me off. I was there at the doorway of the temple. I gave him a hug. I said, "Thanks for driving me." And then, we parted ways, and I turned around and I saw my brother crying. And that was the first time probably I saw my brother crying since we were children, since we were small kids, And even then, my brother didn't cry very much. He's a pretty reserved, kind of like non-emotional person. And so that was really like just the last, knife in my heart, seeing my brother, who's, generally a very non-emotional person, crying as he walked away. So I said, okay, anyway, everything, even if I wanted to go back to my previous life, there's nothing to go back to. So I just said, okay, I'm here now. And it was hard, it wasn't easy for me. But somehow or other, Krishna blessed me with some determination. And I really, although it was very difficult, although it was a new environment and I was really young, somehow or other, Krishna empowered me somehow or other to get over all these, at least to just be determined throughout all this turmoil. My father had told me that he never wants to see me again, that I should never call him. He never wants to see my face. I'm not welcome to come home. My mother basically said the same thing. And my parents didn't speak to me for for a little over 2 years. My parents didn't speak to me when I was living in the temple. But anyway, nevertheless, I tried to, just did my best to carry on. And after some time, I really felt like I had a place there, and I really felt like I belonged. And I felt like it was the fruition or the fulfillment of all of those desires that I had, growing up to leave modern society and and also to find a place in the world. I really felt like I had a sense of belonging that I never had previously when I was with the devotees. And then also, of course, I was looking for a consistent philosophy. I was looking for a really good, seriously ethical, logically consistent philosophy. And as I stayed there and as I heard, from the devotees and I read Srila Prabhupada's books, I really realized, honestly, I realized later, I joined first and then became convinced. I really realized that that Krishna consciousness was everything that I was looking for in my life. And in many ways it just happened without, it was completely out of my control. It's not like I was looking for God specifically, nor was I necessarily looking to be like a religious kind of person. But somehow or other, I overlooked, I don't know, I guess you could say Paramatma inspired me to overlook all of the things that devotees were saying or things that I was reading that normally I wouldn't be attracted to or normally that would repulse me, and then just take the things that I thought were good. And then gradually I became convinced about, those things also. So anyway, eventually my parents started speaking to me again, and now our relationship is okay. It's not, it's fine, no problem. And I stayed in San Diego for 4.5 years. I served there as a brahmachari. And my main service was deity worship. I was worshiping the deities there, Shri Shri Radha Giridhari. And then eventually I moved to Atlanta, to Krishna Life, to work on my spiritual master's books as an editor, English editor. And I was at Krishna Life for around a year, and then now for the last several months now I've been here in India. I'm staying in India. So that's, anyway, something about how I came to Krishna consciousness. And Hare Krishna.